How can lower-ranking airmen in a PA shop get involved in crisis planning? That one's pretty easy. If you're not using all your assets, then bad on you. So what you ought to do is in crisis planning is you exercise. You exercise, you're going to exercise like we're going to train like we fight. Are you going to use all your assets? Absolutely. We're talking about ComRail. What about sending this, you got a two-striper. Send them to the base gate. Or, they can be a runner, or they can do this, they can do that. But everybody's got something to contribute. And we're not so fat that you can, Bobby over there, let's not get him involved. He'll just, create a bigger crisis than the little crisis we got right now. Doesn't work that way. Everybody deserves to be trained, and everybody deserves to be involved. So if you're not involving everybody, how can, if you're an airman, what do you do? Say, well, I'm not being involved in everything. It's not on you. It's on you, supervisors, to make sure that you're using all your assets. And like I said, we're not fat enough that you can, exclude somebody, or this is a weekly. It doesn't matter. There are so many things that, to do in a crisis. If you're not using all your assets, bad on you. Bad on you. Let's see what this is. What can a PA do before a crisis to get base leadership to deal with the media rather than leadership automatically saying no to media requests? That's the first thing they're going to do, is say no. You know why? Because they don't like the media. Remember I said, hey, and a lot of the people in leadership feel this way. So John Wayne didn't have to put up with this growing. I watched Rio Bravo. I didn't see any freaking media show up. Well, guess what? John Wayne's dead. He's been dead for about 30 years, and besides, he was an actor and everything. That's not the way the world works today. Now, you go to your wing commander prior to the crisis, hopefully, and say, sir, we got to train like we fight and everything, and we're going to have media there. Just keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. When the crisis happens, he's going to forget, or she's going to forget they ever said that. So you got to go to them and make it look like that it's to their advantage. What's their advantage? Well, sir, we got two choices. Either somebody else can put out our information, or we can put it out. And we know it's correct. We can control that train, or just let it go and hope for the best. They won't want to do that. Their first instinct, like I said, is going to go into a crouch mode. They want to be in a bunker because they can't control it. So you got to say, at least in this way, what we're putting out, we can control it. They'll like that. So probably more than anything else is you go to your wing leadership and say, during a crisis, the information is going to go out. Could be Airman Snuffy, putting out something on Twitter or something like that. And I know you don't want that. So let us get the information out so you control the information that's going out, not everybody else. Now, don't expect to bat 1,000 and convince your wing commander. I had a wing commander one time. This guy, well, he wasn't a wing commander, he was a director and everything, a 2-star. He goes, I don't want to work with the media because when I was a major, they misspelled my name in the paper. It's like, get over it. And it's time to move on. The biggest thing about the Air Force, they want to feel like they're in control, and the media gives them a bad feeling because they can't control it. Show them that they can have a modicum of control, but don't set the expectation so high. Say, sir, we can either bat 0, we can bat 500, but we're never going to bat 1,000. I would say we want to bat 500. Is if we don't put anything out, we know everything's going to be wrong. If we put everything out, even if they mess it up, some of them are going to get the word out. Now, like I said, is the truth is putting on his shoes and a lie's gone around the world 3 times. If that misinformation gets out, and this is what you're telling your wing commander, if that misinformation gets out, where it's going to take us days, if ever, we can correct the record. Now, I know you don't want to do that, sir. Let me get the information out so you can have some sort of control over it. Everything. That's probably the best thing. That's the best argument you can make to a wing commander or wing leadership. This question: to prepare for a crisis, what key leaders on base should we media train and why? This one is maybe the toughest of all because everybody's different. Everybody is, in other words, sometimes I've seen wing commanders that could be movie stars, the way they're communicators. They could be Ronald Reagan. I've seen wing commanders that you're pretty sure could not their brain couldn't power their feet to take 3 steps and everything. People say, what about a chaplain or what about this? I can't tell you. Some of the naturals are the chaplain. Now, believe it or not, in a lot of your crises, it's a lawyer. It's a JAG. Why? Because they know the rules and they don't know the rules. The problem is you got to get them to knock it down from Harvard Law School to something somebody can understand. We talked about having a female spokesperson, particularly for a long crisis. I've worked twice with some female JAGs and everything that were absolutely outstanding. And you media train them, and what do you media, all right, when do you media train them? You media train them during that exercise. Say, listen, we're going to have 5 potential spokespeople. And those spokespeople are going to be you, and you. Now, I know you don't want to step in front of the camera without any kind of training, so let's do some training and figure out if you're the person that we want. Now, the chances are they'll do, at first they'll be kind of rough. In other words, but you're the professional communicator. You can help them. You can help them improve. And if you can't do it, SAPA's got a great media training program. They'd be glad to help you out. Or even your MAGCOM's got a great, media training program. Anybody can be improved on camera. Now, what you got to do, though, is get your wing commander to delegate that possibility. A lot of times it turns out it's going to be the vice wing commander. If it's the vice wing commander, you better hope. The wing commander's got, I want somebody that's kind of in charge, but I personally don't want to do it. I'm going to be making those executive type decisions. Hey, Colonel Hosenose, you're going to be the one that's in charge and everything. Then your spokesperson has already figured out for you. So, not really sure. I can't look at your bases and say who's your best spokesperson, but some of the obvious choices are wing commander, vice wing commander, chaplain, JAG, and anybody else who might be a subject matter expert. Now, wait a minute. This just in. She's wandering over here. This one is long. I don't want to do it long. It'll take a long time to read. We have our entire shop watching this. Hi, guys. And one of our airmen have this question. I want to ask, about your recommendation not to put out the numbers in crisis situation. I would say there are situations when putting out numbers should be a priority. This is when in-troops and PSYOPs decisions have to trump PA policies. During my mission as a NATO civilian in Afghanistan, I strongly pushed for numbers of casualties pushed out so that the enemy would not win the information battlefield. Now, that's a good point. Now, during Al-Qaeda, this happens a lot of time, overseas if you're over in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda and their brethren, the Haqqani and all these other people, they'll take credit for the Hindenburg disaster, the Titanic sinking, all this other stuff. Yes, in that case, if you want to put out numbers, if they're saying, you might want to say if there was an attack on the base and you had 1 killed and you're sure you had 1 killed, that's the long pole in the tent that you're sure you only had one killed and everything. By all means, put that out. Because Al-Qaeda would claim they killed 100 and stampeded everybody and, there's death, destruction, and the Americans are this close to surrendering and everything. Absolutely. And I know there is an IO benefit. The thing that worries me about numbers is the way they change. And, when I was over in Afghanistan, when we got attacked, we would suffer casualties and everything, and the numbers would change all the time. So be careful. That's the only thing I say. But you make a good point. Is sometimes for IO capabilities, sometimes you do want to put out the numbers so you don't leave an empty battlefield to the enemy. Because information more than anything else is the most important thing on the battlefield these days. The enemy knows they can't beat us tank on tank, plane on plane. Even Kim Jong-il sitting up in North Korea with his modified Elvis do and everything is not deranged enough to know that he can't beat us in a full-out battle. So what do they try to do? They try to beat us through PA, through communications. Do you know that about 30% of Al-Qaeda's efforts are put into PA? We can't say that in the Air Force, but we can battle them. The good thing is we've been up against idiots so far. That's probably been our biggest strength. It's not going to happen all the time, so you are going to be at the edge of the point of the spear probably more than anybody else because this is how fights are handled these days. So hopefully what you've gotten out of this is, number one, is train like you fight. In other words, try to get into the exercise. And I know it's tough. I've been there and everything. But do everything you can to get into any kind of training and make it imperative that the wing commander sees the media or information as a dynamic on the battlefield or a dynamic during the crisis or a dynamic in anything. Because they are. Audiences, don't forget your internal. Your internal, in my way of thinking, is the most important audience. Why? Because you have thousands of Air Force people, spokesperson, and we've got the technology today for them to communicate to thousands of others. And they're going to be quizzed. And if they don't have the information, they can't put out the straight scoop, so you're going to be behind on that. Media we've talked about, don't forget about ComRel. Community relations, and you say, well, that one's kind of, no, it doesn't take much, and it'll serve you well down in the future. Is these MAC chairmen, these mayors, these all this stuff, they'll be a better friend of the Air Force after the crisis, and sometimes you're going to need them. All right, we talked about post-crisis. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to get that log. We're going to work backwards. But most of all, what we're going to do is make sure that we bring in people that were not in public affairs and make sure that they get their input. If they don't get their input, you're like I said, it's a self-licking ice cream cone. You're never going to be able to figure out exactly how you affected things. Figure out what kind of crisis it is. Is it a long-term? Is it a short-term? And I thought we were about to go off, but I've got to see another question. One more question. Wait a minute. I'm going to pull you on camera just to show you. Look at this. I got all these freaking questions all over the place. All right. How do we gently steer? I don't gently do it. How do we gently steer away from airmen blabbing everything about the accident on their Facebook, Twitter? I've seen during events that suddenly media has more information than we do. Boy, that's the truth, from Airman Snuffy tweeting from the flight line. I tell you what, more than anything else these days, those cameras, what else can they do? Well, they can get on there, they can call, they're tweeting this. What else can they do? They're taking pictures. You got cameras, and guess what they do with them? They put them up on their Facebook. Or they do. What can you do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. And that's something that we're going to have to accept. And that probably drives commanders as crazy as everything. Because not only the media putting out bad stuff, now we got airmen. But that goes back to how important it is to educate that internal audience. If you don't educate that internal audience, you're going to be fighting that the entire time. I wish I could sit there and say, well, what are we? Are we Egypt trying to cut off the internet? No, we can't do that. Technology is driving this more than anything else. Yes, that's why today more than any other time, our internal audience is the most important audience we can get to during a crisis. So I wish I could say, how do you gently tell these people not to do this? There is no way. You can put something out on your Twitter or your Facebook, your wing Facebook, but is it going to make an impact? I don't see it. I don't see it. So manage that expectation. Go to your wing commander and say, hey, we know there's going to be a lot of misinformation being put out by our own people. Let's try to minimize that by getting the information out to our people as quickly as possible. A troop that's in the know is a more effective troop. So do everything you can to get that internal information out to your internal troops. Now, I understand, do we have any telephone calls or anything like that as I glance off camera here to see if there's anything? I'm looking in the control room. Okay, I'm getting in my... All right. I've been told from my magic IFB and everything that we're going to have to wrap this up. I think I've summarized everything we're looking for. Please remember, do the right thing, and it's an art, not a science. When people try to tell you do this and only do that and everything, that's not true. You'll figure it out. And let me remind you that I understand that we're going to be back here at 11 o'clock tonight doing the same thing to talk about some of our overseas folks. They get to have as much fun as you did. Thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll see you later.